Hi, I'm Beth from Sew Country, and today's tutorial is for the Jessica pattern from Sallie Tomato. Today is my day off work. I just finished baking my favorite recipe of bread. Laundry is done, and I wanted to spend some time in the sewing room. I didn't want anything too complicated, so I picked this pattern because it's a simple, easy pattern. I also didn't want to spend a lot of time cutting and interfacing, so this one's great because it only has a few pieces and I can use a vinyl with this pattern. And using vinyl gives me the benefit of saving some time on cutting and interfacing. So I am choosing to use, I don't know if you can see the shimmer on this. This is vinyl from Sallie Tomato. It is called Lunar Shimmer. It is a smooth vinyl, and I typically am not a fan of smooth vinyls, but vinyls like this I love. In this video, while we don't have a lot of steps, I want to take the time to kind of explain the best tips and practices for sewing a pattern, for working with vinyl, and things like that. So while the steps may be ones you're used to, we're going to kind of focus on the best techniques to get the best finished result. Since I only sew on a domestic machine, it's very important to me to make sure I pick the right materials for my machine. Whenever I'm looking at vinyls, especially a smooth vinyl, for some reason I find smooth vinyls tend to be stiffer. I want one that is very pliable. You can see when I fold this in half, I have a really nice curve here. I do not have a sharp point or angle. It's just very rounded and smooth. That lets me know that whenever I am sewing around these curves, I'm not going to get a lot of creases or like dents. It's going to be a smooth finish here. So this vinyl is perfect. It's a great domestic vinyl. And so it's kind of soft and even like a little padded. So it's fairly easy to work with and it won't give my machine any trouble. I did go ahead and attach foam to both the front and back exterior pieces. So these are the two pieces I'll need to create the front and the back of the bag. There is the foam attached to it. I'm also using two pieces of a cotton canvas for the lining. Now my cotton canvas comes from Coffins and Diamonds, and this is one of my favorite prints. I'd forgotten about it, bought it last year, just set it on the shelf and didn't think about it. So I'm going to make something else with this soon to use it up because I think I have like almost 2 yards of it. But it has a great texture. It's a really big print, so it shows up really nice. It's not too busy. I did go ahead and attach one of my tags to it, but that's all I'm doing to this lining. I'm not adding pockets or anything like that, though you could add a slip pocket, you could add a zipper pocket. I didn't want to today. Today I just wanted to come in the sewing room, make something simple but pretty, and kind of give my mind a chance to relax and just enjoy sewing. These are the two exterior main pieces. The tag I did put, I'll probably keep this on the front of the bag, but if I want, I might change it to the back. Not for sure, but right now I'm thinking this will be the front. So that is the two exterior and two lining pieces I need. The other thing we're going to need for this bag is the gusset. This gusset is actually just going to be given measurements as a rectangle. Then she gives you steps as to how to cut it out. So let's go through how you're going to do that. So I had a rectangle here, and she tells you to measure at a certain point at the short edge. So you make that mark. Then she tells you to measure down so many inches, and you make a mark there. And then you just draw a line to connect them, creates a diagonal, and you cut it out. You do that on both sides of each end. You also do it for your lining. It's just a way to create a shaped gusset piece without providing the pattern piece. So you might feel like you might get confused on that, but just remember, you make your first mark from your short edge and then you go down, make your other mark, and then just draw a line in between. For the exterior gusset, I chose to use another Sallie Tomato vinyl, but this time I chose to use their charcoal pebbled vinyl. I love using a textured pebbled vinyl. It's one of my favorites. So typically whenever I go to buy vinyl, I will almost always buy a textured pebbled vinyl. The smooth vinyl, I don't buy it unless I know specifically the company it's coming from and the weight of their vinyl, and if it's a really flexible, easy to manipulate vinyl. For their pebbled vinyl, Again, Sally's tomato is really thin, folds in that perfect curve, will not give me any problems with the gusset. I chose to use a contrast on the gusset. Not only did I think it would look really nice to have the contrast, I also picked it because this vinyl doesn't hardly stretch. This vinyl stretches quite a bit. I don't know if you can see how far, but that has a lot of stretch to it. If I were to use this as a gusset, I would have had to have interfaced it. Not just added the foam, but actually put either a Decavillite or a medium weight interfacing to kind of get rid of some of that stretch. I just didn't want to do that, and then I thought, you know what, it will look good having a little bit of contrast. So I went ahead and chose the charcoal for the gusset. You'll have one for the lining, of course. And then the only other things I did was I cut out 2 connectors. I did choose to do not a double fold. I did a single fold, just added those raw edges to the middle. I haven't top stitched. I just glued this down so it would stay in place, but I'm going to top stitch down both of these. I don't like when I'm using vinyl to do a double fold, especially with a connector, because what's going to happen is we're going to fold that and then we're getting a lot of extra bulk there. This is about the level of comfort I feel with any extra bulk. It's not that my machine can't handle it. It can. It's that I don't like the way it looks or it feels. I just feel like it's a little bit more risky for it to pull out. I like it just, I don't like it any thicker than this. If I would have done a double fold on this, we would have had a lot more bulk, and I would have had to use a hump jumper. I would have had to been struggling a little bit to get it over. So I don't want extra bulk in these connector areas. So this is the way I do mine. For my connectors, I am choosing to use O-rings. I don't use O-rings a lot, and these are Sallie Tomato 2. They're 1.5 inch. But I wanted to use this because the shape of this bag is kind of a curve, and I think this will just look really good to kind of echo that curve in the bag. So I'm going to attach the connectors through the O-rings and then add them to the gusset. My strap, I went back and forth on my strap. Do I want the charcoal strap or do I want this lunar shimmer strap? I decided I wanted this. I just love the way this looks, and I just feel like it'll make a really pretty strap. I did go ahead and draw my line down the middle. I'm going to do a double fold on this. I will not have any problem sewing this, and since it's not going to be in a seam, it won't add any extra bulk, so that it'll just go through my O-ring connector. I am going to add rivets to this pattern. This pattern calls for Chicago screws whenever you're working on the strap to kind of attach it and to add a little bit of decoration, but I'm choosing to use rivets. Chicago screws are great, especially if you're a beginner bag maker and you don't have all the tools like a rivet press and everything like that. You're not for sure if you want to get that far into hardware. When you have a Chicago screw, all you do is make a hole. You punch the hole just like you would with a rivet, but then you don't need the dies or the press for the rivets. You just use a screwdriver and screw the Chicago screw in. It's really simple, and it's great for even you're just starting out, but it does take a little bit of time. And on the back side of a Chicago screw, you do see the screw where you can twist it and turn it, so you do have kind of a wrong side. And so I'm going to use double cap rivets so both of my sides will be smooth. That's how I'm going to be attaching the strap to the bag. One other thing, since like I said, I just want kind of a relaxing sew, I am opting, I don't know if you can see in the pattern, but this pattern actually has a zip closure at the top. I'm opting to not do that. Not because it's hard, not because I don't like it, just because I just wanted to do this bag as a drop-in lining, and I couldn't really with the zipper the way it's installed. And so I'm going to do a drop-in lining, and I'm going to use a magnetic riveted snap if I feel like it needs it. I want to sew the bag completely, and then we'll look at it at the end and see if it needs a snap closure to stay closed, or if it's opening too wide and just doesn't sit right. The instructions for this, the zipper are very easy. If you ever want me to do another version of this with that zipper, I can definitely. I just today didn't feel up to doing it. So since I'm changing that, the way I prep for a drop-in lining is I came to the back of both my front and my back exterior lining pieces, and I drew a line. I chose to draw this line 3/4 of an inch down. I'm going to sew the bag up completely. After I'm done sewing, I will simply fold the raw edge down to that line, clip it in place, drop in the lining, and then top stitch around. You can see I did the same line on the lining. I just like drop-in linings. I didn't want to fool with a zipper today, and this just makes more sense for me, so this is what I'm doing. So those are the pieces. That's my plan, and let's just have a fun day sewing and taking our time and kind of focusing on proper techniques when sewing, especially with vinyl. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work on attaching our gusset to our exterior front, or what I'm considering my front currently. I attached the foam before I started this video. I went back and forth on if I wanted to quilt the vinyl. I love the look of quilted vinyl, but I do feel like quilting on vinyl is a little bit challenging at times if you don't use a walking foot, and I did not want to do that, so I decided not to. I have quilted on vinyl lots of times, and sometimes it looks great and sometimes I have a little bit of issues. So for this, I did not want to mess it up, and like I said, I wanted to kind of just have a more relaxing sew, so I chose not to. The first thing I did after I attached the foam, and I just attached my foam by lengthening my stitch length and basting all around, is I marked the centers. I marked the centers on the bottom and the top actually, but I marked the centers on the bottom of this exterior piece, and then I marked the centers on both sides of the gusset. That's going to make it easy to put the gusset together. I'm just going to flip this gusset up right sides together and match up those center marks. I'm going to use plastic clips because I feel like with this is being a little thick, that'll help it hold together. But if you feel like your metal clips would hold just fine, go ahead and do that. I'm trying to use metal clips more often because I do have a tendency to break these plastic ones. And someone reminded me metal clips wouldn't break, and they were right. That's true. So I need to start using more metal clips. Now that I have this bottom part, the center is marked, I just put a few clips there on that straight spot. I ignore everything else and take the side and pull it straight up to the top. What I like to do is I like to put a clip here at the main top first, just to secure this to keep that flush, because it sometimes tries to shift. Then I'm going to go all the way down this side. This is the first time I've made this pattern, so I'm trusting that the pattern measurements and the pattern piece for the front and the back will make this gusset have a good fit. If you have a pattern, it's the first time you're sewing it and it doesn't fit properly, there are ways to kind of maneuver it around, but a great designer, oh, and look at that. A great designer tests out the gusset with several people before they give you those measurements, and this one's beautiful. I love that. So good, so good. I'm not going to worry too much about this curve. It's not a very tight curve, but there are several tips whenever you're sewing around curves. A lot of people use staples. They have a mini stapler gun and they use it to kind of staple this in place on the outside of the seam allowance. So if your seam allowance is 1/2 inch, you would probably put your staples around 1/8 inch. I don't use staples. When you use staples, you either have to take the staples out or you have to cut off that seam allowance to get rid of the staples. You do not leave the staples in the back. I never do that. Some people hand base. That's a good way. If you want to like have a sharp curve, you can just sew by hand to lock in those stitches there and then come over the machine, sew it with the full seam allowance. I don't do that either. If I'm worried about a curve, I glue. I use Beacon 3-in-1 glue. I keep it always right beside me. It's always here. And that is what I do to baste some spots of curves if I feel like they're going to slip while I'm sewing. I do not feel like with this bag that the curve is sharp enough that it will slip. So I am just going to use my stiletto. If I feel it is slipping, I can even get out my forceps and hold the two pieces together. The main thing to remember is while you're sewing to go slow so that you don't lose the two raw edges. Of course, they're going to have a tendency to shift, especially when you're working, having a little bit of You can see a little bit not fitting there. Doesn't mean that's bad. It just means I need to kind of shift and adjust, and it'll ease in perfectly. Anyway, whenever I'm sewing with a cotton canvas or a cotton woven, they kind of grip each other a little bit more, so I have less chance of slipping. Especially when I'm adding foam into the mix with the vinyl, there is a chance that things could be fed through a little bit unevenly. There's some slipping, or things might just feed through a little bit differently. So we go slow and we take our time washing those raw edges. I'm going to keep my stitch length at about a 3.5. I'm going to use a polyester thread. Everybody has a preferred seam allowance. With this bag, the way this gusset is, it's really not going to matter so much. This is not a part where the seam allowance is a huge, big deal, as long as you're consistent with both sides and the lining. So for me, I'm going to probably go with my preferred seam allowance, and if you have one, do the same thing. Okay, so I am starting there at the top. I'll go ahead and move that first clip out of the way. I'm going to push everything down secure, and I can see that it's trying to shift a little already. And you can see that's just a little bit overhanging. That's not what I want, even though it won't be a big deal. I'll put that clip back in there and pull it up. This is what I mean by taking the time to focus on the technique. Sometimes we're in a hurry and we just want to rush, but today I just want to make sure I sewed a proper bag. So I always back stitch when I start and stop. Once I get those first stitches locked in, I have a little bit more wiggle room to take off because everything's kind of already getting secured. I'm going to take off that clip. I'm going to push this down so that I can see clearly that straight edge. I never watch my needle when I'm sewing. I just focus on that seam allowance. When we come up to this curve, we can see we have a little bit of gap there. I'm going to go ahead and pull out these hemostats. What I'll do is I'll grab that top layer, lock it into place, and I'm going to hold it tight. So whenever I'm sewing, and the forceps not in the seam allowance, it will not be hit by the needle, and so I can keep it in place while I'm going around. I don't have to use those as much when I'm working with a cotton woven because, like I said, the grip kind of keeps them together. And with the foam and the vinyl, you have to just be a little bit more careful about making sure things stay in line. I take a few stitches and I pivot. A lot of students in my classes, they want to try to go really fast, and that's not the way to get done with a bag quickly. When you go fast, you have more chances that you'll make mistakes, and that will slow you down because you have to seam rip it down. Slow and steady always wins with sewing. Another reason to go slow is that when you get to the end, you're more likely to not have stretching and distortion with the material, so you get that perfect finish where everything's still lined up at the end. So don't feel like you need to hurry and rush, and that's the sign of being a good sewist, because I don't believe that. I think most sewists still go slow because they know that quality matters. Now we can just peek in here and see that looks wonderful. Beautiful, beautiful. It's going to be a great bag. So now that we have this, only thing we have to do now is go ahead and attach that other back piece the same way to the gusset. So again, I'm going to put them right sides together. Match up those center marks and then just do a few clips here along the straight edge. And then again come to the top. And I want to match up the top part first and then start clipping down. I am going to do these same steps on the lining. If you choose to use the zipper method, you will have to make a choice to either leave an opening in your lining or add a zipper pocket to your lining. so that you will have a way to birth the bag. Since I'm using a drop-in lining, I do not have to worry about leaving an opening in the lining because we won't need to birth it through that opening. Another perfect fit on the gusset. Everything looks great. I'm going to sew this the exact same way. I'm going to have the main back that I'm sewing on the bed of the machine. I will use my hand to push everything over. Yeah, it's a little trickier because you have a little bit more bulk, but it's not bad. I'm going to sew with the same seam allowance. Whatever you choose to sew with at this top, you have to sew with at the bottom. I'll do the exact same steps, going slow, locking in my stitches whenever I start and stop, using my forceps if it's getting to where it's slipping and being uneven. But I will sew all the way around this gusset the same way. I'm also going to repeat those same steps with my lining piece, the gusset, and with my front and back lining pieces. No difference at all. I'm not leaving an opening, nothing. So since I drop in, no openings left, completely the same. I'm going to go ahead and complete these steps off camera just because I don't want to waste your time making you watch the exact same thing over and over again. But it's the same steps, and then we'll come back. All I have to do when I come back is go ahead and fold down, add the connectors, sew up my strap, and I have this bag finished. That's why I wanted a very relaxing sew today. Quick, easy, and it's going to be so pretty, I think. So I went ahead and sewed the other side of the exterior, so my exterior's done. I did the same thing for the lining. Again, since I'm doing a drop-in lining, no opening in mine. Set this aside. I went ahead and pulled out my strap. So let's talk a little bit about my strap. I am using the Lunar Shimmer vinyl from Sallie Tomato, and I'm not choosing to use any interfacing. Since I'm using that 1.5 circle ring, I know you would think that I would want a 1 inch at least diameter for this strap, but at the bottom, which is where this strap is going to lay, if I put a 1 inch, and I've done this before, it just doesn't lay right. It just doesn't look good. So I'm using a 3/4 of an inch strap. So for me, the way, and this is different from the way the pattern does theirs. They do theirs a little bit differently. They have a raw edge on one end of their strap, which is fine. You can do that, but I didn't want that. I wanted a finished edge, so I'm doing a 4-way fold. And I cut my strap to 3 inches wide. I kept the length the same, but I wanted to be able to get that extra fold in there so that everything's finished. It's a very sturdy strap, which is fine because that's the way I like the feel of my straps. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew down both sides of this strap. Now, we did talk about how this vinyl's a little stretchy, which is completely okay. If it stretches a little bit, that won't be a problem. Since this vinyl's a little bit stretchy, if I sew the same way down both sides, I have a less chance of it doing that twisting that we see straps sometimes do. I'm not saying it'll prevent it completely. I'm just saying it might lessen a little bit. But I'm not worried too much about it. It usually straightens up, especially if I lay it underneath something flat. I'm just going to do it the easy way. I'm going to sew down one side, then cut across the short end, then come back up the other side. I think it'll be okay. That's the way I typically do them, but I just wanted to share that tip. If it bothers you, go down both sides and you'll have less twisting of your strap. Other than that, we're going to sew this strap. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to fold down these edges. I'm going to go ahead and turn my exterior right sides out because I'm just putting the lining in, sewing around it, and then we're done. So this is a simpler way to do a bag. I do love drop-in linings. They are my favorite way to finish a bag if it's an opening like this. If you have the gusset that goes down to the side, oh gosh, those are hard to do on a flatbed machine. I did not trim my seam allowances. You can see I did great. Those curves look beautiful. I am fine. There's not a lot of bulk there. If you feel like your curves don't look good, you can put a few clips in there to manipulate and shape those edges. I don't feel like I need that, so I'm just pushing with my fingers and getting everything poked out properly. That one's a little, you can see a little bit of bulk there, so I'll just kind of smush it with my fingers and it's fine. So to fold those edges down, you can see the line, or I hope you can see that line right here. I'm simply taking the raw edge and it's going to meet it. It doesn't have to be perfect. If it goes over a little or under a little, that's okay. But we're just going to clip all the way around, putting that raw edge directly on that line. I'm going to do this with both the exterior and the linings of the bag. I'm not going to do it all on camera just to save you guys a few extra minutes, but I'll continue clipping around, and then I will come back once I have all of these raw edges clipped down to show you what it looks like, and then to show you the next step. Whenever we come to the seam, I like to butterfly that seam open to push it down. So that means when I butterfly, open it up, so half of the seam goes one way, the other half goes the other way. That is how I'm going to clip it down. You don't have to do that. You can keep it to one edge. I just feel like that lessens the bulk a little bit, so it can be stitched over a little bit easier with less of a bump there. But it is a personal preference of mine. I have seen other tutorials where they don't butterfly that seam there because they feel like that weakens that seam a little bit, and then they'll just nest the lining seam in with the exterior and stitch around that way. So that is an option too if you do not feel comfortable with the butterflying. I'm not going to add any double-sided tape. I'm not going to add any glue. I'm just clipping, and then I'll put the lining inside and clip them together. You can add something if you need to. I don't feel it's necessary though. I've sat here and talked until we're almost done with the exterior and have it clipped all the way around. Sorry about that. I just wanted to share the few tips that might make this a little bit easier. Okay, I'll do the rest of this off camera for the lining, so that way I won't waste any more of your time with just random chatter. Okay, so let's go to the last few pieces we have. Here's my strap clipped, ready to be sewn. Here is my exterior clipped down to that line I drew. It is right sides out. My lining is wrong sides out and it's clipped as well. And then I also have my O-rings and my two connectors. We're almost done. First thing I want to do is I'm going to take my lining and I want to have my tags on opposite sides. That's the only thing I have that's an addition to this. Everything else is just the same. So I'll have them opposite sides. I'll start by matching up my side seams. The designer tells us that we can grade the seams on this lining. I did not do that because since I'm using a drop-in lining, if my lining's too baggy, I can just roll it down more. When you grade the seams on a bag, what you're doing is you're starting at one seam allowance, maybe say a 3/8, and then you increase to up to maybe a 1/2 of an inch or 5/8 as you continue sewing. At the top, you always want to keep it about the same seam allowance as your exterior. Otherwise, they won't fit together. Your lining would be too small. With this, when you do a drop-in lining, if you don't like the way the lining looks, you just fold it down more. You're not sewing blind. Whereas with a drop-in, you don't know if it's going to fit until after you turn around, and if it looks baggy, you're like, okay, it's too baggy. I am clipping all the way around here. I do see my linings a little bit baggy. I'm going to see if I can get that to fix in properly. If not, I'll have to adjust a little bit more. Okay, it is fitting. Let's see how it looks. So I can see it's a little bit baggy. I could easily fold down my lining more than my exterior to kind of have it a tighter fit. I'm okay with it though, because if you see when I open it up, it's all the way to the bottom and it's not too baggy, just a little. So if I were to do this pattern again as a drop-in lining, what I would do differently is instead of drawing the line on the lining to 3/4 of an inch, I would draw the lining line at 1 inch. I'd keep the exterior at 3/4, and that would just give a little bit of a tighter fit inside there. It's not bad, and it's not enough to where I'm like, oh, I need to fix it, but that's just something I would do next time, as just to get the bag a little more the way I like the lining to look. When I'm clipping these two edges together, I want my lining just slightly lower than my exterior. Not even, just like a 1/16 of an inch, so not even an 1/8 of an inch. Just whenever I'm sewing it, it's not going to be showing through. It won't matter if it does, it's just a personal preference. So I'm just going and shifting, making sure everything looks good. Put another clip here. And I don't want to leave these clips on long. So if I couldn't sew this bag right now, I wouldn't clip it until I was ready to sew it. I would not clip it and leave the clips on overnight. Most of the time the dents will come out really quick, but I wouldn't want to take any risks that it would leave a permanent indentation in there. And I can see right now that I definitely am going to want to add the snap, because you can see how it opens really wide. I'm going to have to probably add a magnetic snap so that it does close there. Okay, so now let's grab out these connectors. And let's go ahead and take one of the connectors, slide it through, and clip it. I'm going to go ahead and just baste these edges closed, just so I don't have them flopping around and the rings falling off whenever I'm trying to stitch everything around. I'm not going to trim anything, we'll leave these long, because I'm going to put them in there and then I'll probably add a rivet after I sew around, just for extra security. So let's just baste that edge just 1/8 of an inch away from the raw edge. I'm going to take this connector and I'm going to center it on this side seam, on the gusset I should say, and just stick it in there. Like I said, I'm going to leave it long, so I'm just going to stick it till it's barely hanging up so I can add a rivet there, so that will give me a little bit extra security. Even though I'm stitching around it, I just want more security that this will not come out, and a rivet will give me that. You can, like I said, use a Chicago screw if you want to, but I'm using a rivet. I'm going to double check that it looks good, it looks centered. When I'm sewing, I'm going to be careful that it doesn't shift. So I'm going to go slowly around this area, holding that ring and that connector tightly, so whenever my foot is going over, it's not pushing it to where it's off centered. Let's do the same thing with that other side. I love the way this looks. It is such a just a cute, simple bag, and I really like my lining. I like that the lining is kind of unique and fun, while the exterior is very formal and classy. Okay, that looks great. Let's sew all the way around. Now you have the choice of flipping this so that the exterior is inside and the lining is outside, and top stitching on the exterior. I'm okay with top stitching on the lining, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to push everything in, make sure the lining's flat. I'm going to make sure my bobbin is going to be matching the exterior of the bag, and that my top thread is okay to match my lining. I slide it in, and I always start on a straight spot, and I'm just going to go about 1/8 of an inch away. I'm going to, let's go ahead and pull our threads long before we get started, because I think I'm going to knot off instead of back stitching here. I'm going to try to keep the same seam allowance around this tire and perimeter of the bag. I'm going to go slow because it really doesn't matter to me, this final top stitching, so that it looks nice. I don't want to go through all these steps to have a cute bag and at the end the top stitching be sloppy. So I will speed this section up, but I'm going to go very slow all the way around. I'll be going this speed all the way around the bag because I just want to get the best
possible look that I can. As we're coming to that curve, that corner spot to get on the gusset, I want to roll this entire bag over. So I want to rotate that entire piece over to go slow. Keep my seam allowance. I'm getting ready to come up to this D-ring. I want to make sure it's pushed in. We'll check to make sure it's centered. You can use a hump jumper here if you feel you need to. You can hand crank if you feel like your machine doesn't want to go over it. I'm going to flatten everything out so everything stays straight right under the foot. I move my clips out just at the last minute I need to. Don't pull on your clips either when working with vinyl because that could cause the vinyl to tear. I'm back at another straight section, so I'll speed the camera up again. I lost my top stitching just a little on this spot here because my D-ring was shifting, and so I went to get it and kind of veered off. So I may have to fix that. I hope it's not too noticeable, but I went ahead and took my D-ring out so I just didn't have to worry about that again. I'm going to put it back in here. If that bothers you, you could add some glue to this when you stick it in, but I'm okay with just holding it until I get back to that spot because I'm almost done. Make sure that D-ring gets centered back in there again. Continue to stitch around. Definitely go slow around the hardware. Okay, I finished the top stitching. I'm so nervous to see that spot where I messed up. Let's go ahead and take it off. Oh, and I forgot to keep my threads long on that one. That's okay, I can get it pulled out. You can see that's okay, that's okay. Oh, there it is. Yep, I have to fix that. So you can see it is just up too much. I don't like it. I'm not going to leave it that way. So I am going to pull out those stitches and just correct this area here. I'll break one stitch and then I'll keep these long so I can pull them to the back and knot them. Yes, it's an extra step, but when I mess up, you gotta be willing to fix it to have a nice looking bag. I don't think those holes will show so much, even though they're vinyl, but if they were showing, you can see they're already kind of disappearing. I kind of rub and it kind of gets in there. You can get a warm metal spoon, not hot, just warm, and put it on there to kind of melt just a little bit. Just be really careful with that. I have done it before in the past. So now that the stitches are out, I'll come to the back and I can pull them through and then knot them just like normal so that I don't have stitches falling out everywhere. Okay, I will cut this thread right in the middle and be able to knot both of those off. I won't knot them off on camera just to not waste your time, but I will show you. Let me get that pulled down there. So what I did was I cut the thread so I have them long enough to where I can knot them, and I am just going to re-top stitch this area just to make sure it's, since I lost it that first time, I will start a few stitches away and then just go over that area again. Being much more careful this time. Definitely pull those stitches on now. Okay, so I'm going to pull my threads on all of these spots, and then I will add the rivets down here. I can feel where that connector is, so I can add a rivet right there, add one right here. I'm going to sew up my strap, and then I'm also going to add the rivets on my strap. So that'll be just a nice decorative touch and also kind of help stabilize everything. So let's go ahead and sew up the strap and then get on with those few finishing touches to the bag. So I went ahead and used my hole punch to punch the holes in several things. I just get this off Amazon. The reason I don't do it on camera is I need to hold it close to my body because I kind of have a weak wrist, and so that helps me to have the leverage I need to get the holes in there.
So I have rivets and then I have magnetic snaps. All of these come from camsnaps.com. It's who I use for all my rivets, whether they're magnetic snaps or whether they're double caps. I love her and she's great to work with. So on the post, the one with the long post on the end, I have a rivet hole here and I'm just going to push it through. It'll go through the hole and come out the other side. I take the rivet with the small short post and then I just put it on there. Well, maybe sometimes I drop it inside, but I just put it on there. When you put it on there, you'll feel a little snap and you'll know it's kind of secured in there. Now I'll still need to take this over to the press to push it and clamp it down so it's actually installed, but it'll stay in place there until I get it over there. I'm going to do the same thing for this other side. I decided that I did not feel like sewing the straps down. I was ready just to be done with the bag. So I am not sewing down my straps like I typically do. I'm just going to use the rivet. So I went ahead and have two in place here. There's a lot of places that sell the tools to make those holes. I don't have that. I just kind of fold mine and figure out where I want to place it. And then I put the holes there. I don't use any tool. I just kind of eyeball it. I'm pretty, I don't know, lazy maybe like that. So I push the rivet through the top one and I make sure I feed it through from the outside to the inside. That way the raw edge is on the inside. I fold it and just push it through the other one. My rivets are long enough to go through both. It's a very tight fit, but it does fit. I'm going to snap the end in place there. This one's a little bit harder. Perfect. Look at that. It's beautiful. Okay, do the same thing on the other side. Feed it through from the outside in. And it doesn't matter which way you put the rivet in. They look the same from both sides, so that's not an issue at all. Okay, push, push, push to get that to show, and it's going to be a tight fit, like I said, to get it to snap in place. And it's just where it's going through 2 layers of double folded vinyl. My hole's a little small. Let me get my stiletto just to make that hole a little bit bigger to make it go through a little bit easier. That should help. It's still really small. There it goes. Perfect. Okay, so I have both of the rivets in place for the strap, both in place for the connector. I love the way it looks just so sleek, so nice. I love it. So for me, I'm doing these magnetic snaps. You do not have to do snaps. You can do a zipper. I just didn't want to. So I'm going to put the magnetic part on the inside and then the finished smooth edge on the outside. Again, these are the same way. They just snap in place. And again, I will have to take them over to my rivet press. So even though I'm snapping them in here, they're not considered officially set until I snap them in place with the dies. I'm not going to do that on camera. I'm just going to close it right here like this. And my beautiful Jessica bag is completely done. I'm going to just slowly turn that around. Look at that. Can you see the shimmer on this than the camera? I don't know if you can pick it up, but it's blues, purples, silvers, grays. I mean, it's just all the colors. It looks so beautiful. And I just seriously love it. So what I'll do now is when we get off camera, I'll go ahead and finish everything up and take beautiful pictures of my bag. I want to thank Sallie Tomato for letting me make the video for the Jessica pattern and also for having just such beautiful supplies. I really do like their supplies. I feel like they're very beginner, domestic friendly. Their supplies don't require you to have a lot of tools to install things or even to sew on an industrial machine. Everything's domestic friendly. They make a lot of patterns. If you have not looked at the patterns they have a lot of them. They're always coming out with new ones. They have their own video tutorials. If you don't follow them on YouTube, I do suggest that. Their tutorials are really well done. And I just think they're a great company. So I'll have the link for the vinyls and for the pattern in my description. The interior that I love, this cotton canvas, is from Coffins and Diamonds. I love the company. They're doing a pre-order at the end of this month. And like I said, you're going to see me make something else with this lining. I don't know what yet, but I want to do something else. My tags are all from Heartwood and Hide. Some of my tags are special made, but like this is retail. Anybody can get these. So if you're, a lot of people say, well, I'm on the wait list still, I haven't got them, but you can still buy the retail. I bought the retail for months before I got in the queue for my actual tags to be made custom. So thanks for joining me on a very relaxing sew. It was a very simple sew, but I hope you enjoyed figuring out some new ways to make just a quick, simple, beautiful bag with the gusset. Super great pattern. If you have any requests for tutorials or any techniques that you would like me to show on a future video, just let me know. And if there's any designers you would like to see a tutorial for, I can reach out to them and see if they would allow a tutorial to be made. Other than that, have a great day, and I hope you have the time today to make something beautiful in your sewing room.